Hi guys, Ingrid Marsh here, aka the Soul Babe from Soulful Living with Ingrid, and this is the new Vibes Up show. So my mission, my lovelies, is a simple one. It's to spread a new vibration. A vibration of love, a vibration of happiness, and a vibration of light into every corner of the world. So you and I, all of us, can live a more wildly fulfilling life. Now, helping me on my quest and on my mission to bring about change, I'm going to be bringing to you the most amazing guests. And who better to help me kickstart my show? We had the wonderful Melanie, and who better to kickstart my show than the wonderful Ruth Ramsay, who's a sex expert. And she's going to be teaching us, helping us to rewild our sex lives. And why have I brought this about? Research shows that over half of marriages at the moment, there is no sex going on, or very little sex going on. So our Ruth, she's really amazing because she comes from a spiritual perspective as well. It's going to show us how we can rewild our sex lives and what that actually means to her. So make sure you stay listening. My lovely, how are you?
I'm fabulous, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, especially on this particular topic, where there's still so much taboo around sex. It's crazy when it's so normal, and it can be so wonderful. So I'm really thrilled that you're joining me, especially as I've only just relaunched the show. So thank you so much, Ruth. So before I kickstart, just tell us what you do.
Well, my mission is to empower women to live sex lives full of joy, confidence, epic pleasure that then spills over to the rest of their lives as well. That's the mission.
It spills out into the rest of our lives. I love that. So yeah,
absolutely.
I stopped you there.
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to say the kind of plain job title would be that I'm a life coach working in the areas of sex and eroticism.
Fabulous, because you believe, I understand that the energy of sex is quite different to anything else. Could you just explain that a bit more?
I think sex brings together all of our senses and creates, in a way, its own energy from all of those elements. And that if that's something which, if we can learn to feel that and appreciate it, not feel shame for it, and nurture it and use it, then that brings pleasure and empowerment, as we've already touched on, in the rest of your life as well. So it's not just about sex, what happens in the bedroom. It's about living a fulfilled, confident, joyful life overall.
Beautiful. And that just plays a part of it.
Yes, but it can be where it begins. You know, if you think back to a time in your life when you were having fantastic sex.
Right.
Think how you were at work, how you showed up for your family, for your kids, how you were caring for older family members, how you were as a friend. And chances are, across all of those areas, you were at your best. You'll find that is coinciding with having a joyful and pleasurable erotic life as well.
So you're saying that we can't have an erotic, pleasurable sexual life without actually having sex. So you're just saying that it enhances that. What's your explanation there?
Well, when I talk about sex, I don't just mean what we would traditionally think of, which is penis and vagina, which is a very narrow way of looking at it for lots and lots of reasons. And it restricts us in so many ways from appreciating the full spectrum of pleasure and joy that erotic experiences can bring us. It restricts people who don't have a partner from thinking they can have a sexual life as well. And you can have a very rich sexual life without a partner, because the starting point, even if you have a partner, is yourself and how you feel within yourself, how comfortable you are with feeling pleasure, with being honest with yourself about where your pleasure comes from. That's where we need to begin, instead of the mentality that somebody else should do it for us. Did that person make me come? That mentality is something which I try and discourage people away from. If you are fulfilled and know about your own pleasure and can bring yourself pleasure, and I don't just mean a quick jilling off. I love that term. I mean, being able to give yourself extended erotic and sensual pleasure. That's what needs to come first, and then you can take that into an arena with somebody else as well.
You know, I'm in love with you already, Ruth. I really am. Because I truly believe that love, that sensuality, that richness, that moistness of life, it starts with you first. I truly believe that. And when I hear these conversations all the time where people are putting this energy out that they need it outside of themselves first, it's something that it drives me a little bit potty, because I think that we're missing out all the pleasure that's already inside of us. So fabulous. So we're going to go a bit more into that, but let's just start with the research that's gone out there. That over half of couples are not sexually active. There's some more research around that. Some said that many stick together only because of the children. They're very unhappy. They're staying in their marriages only because they're afraid of what they're staying in their marriages because they're afraid of what people might say. Basically, there's a lot of unhappy marriages going on, and they're putting this down to the lack of sex that was happening in the home. But is it realistic, my darling, after 20, 30 years of marriage, that we can still be expecting this wild, erotic sex? Is that realistic?
It's not realistic to expect the same kind of sex as you had when you got together. So often we'll think back to that stage when we were so passionately infatuated with that person that if looking back, actually, technically, the sex wasn't that great, it didn't matter because the slightest touch, absolutely lit us up. That does change. And that's something that needs to be recognised, because if a couple typically have had that and then have been married a couple of years, and I realise this is all very heteronormative, but for the purposes of analysing the study, then they've had busy times in their jobs, then they've had kids. Then when the kids are getting a little bit older and they're having a bit more time as a couple again, they'll think it's not like it was. I don't absolutely thrill with erotic energy from the slightest touch. Oh my God, the relationship, what if the relationship is over? How can we make it like that again? But I think what needs to be recognised is that sex and desire changes within yourself, let alone within the couple. And actually, when I looked through the research, I saw a lot of reasons for hope there. So, for example, 77% of couples said they were comfortable with each other. 77% again said they trusted each other. And I would say comfort, a good comfort level, and trust are fantastic foundations for reigniting your sex life, with the recognition you're not the same people who you were then, and with the recognition that you need to explore, each person needs to explore, kind of do some inner work as to what makes them tick now. You've had life experiences, you've had physical experiences, you've had all this stuff happen since those days. So it's a reassessment of what does sex and eroticism mean to you now as an individual and to your partner, and then what can you bring together? And if you trust each other, I'm not going to spend ages searching for the stats, but I think quite a high proportion said they wanted more of a sexual life back. If it's the case that you really can't stand that person anymore and the mere sight of them or them touching you turns your stomach, then that's maybe a place that it's not going to be possible to come back from. But if you're comfortable, you trust each other, you respect each other, and you do actually have the desire to reignite things erotically, then I think it's a fantastic new adventure waiting to happen. And the last thing I'll say on this is, if you're having regular, unfulfilling sex, then to change from that point, to say to your partner, I know we have sex once a week on a Saturday, but it's not fulfilling me and I want to do something different. That's a more difficult place to start from than our sex life has been dead for a couple of years. Okay, let's reboot it again from here. So I found the statistics, whilst on the surface they look quite grim, that there's a lot of room for hope there, but it needs communication. And that's the area for so many people where there's shame, there's embarrassment. They don't even know what they want. So it's something I hear a lot from clients. I know I want a better sex life, but I don't even know what I want. So we need to do that work first within ourselves to then bring that to our partner and begin, as I say, what can be a fresh, wonderful adventure in that marriage.
Oh, I love that you see something positive from that. And like I said, if we dig a little bit deeper, sometimes we do have to dig a little bit deeper. We do see these messages and these research and jump to conclusions. If we dig a bit deeper, that there is still something there. But you touched on something really important. You talked about the shame. We live in a world of shame where we are shamed. And I'm trying to think to myself, would I be comfortable saying to my partner, we need to talk about our sex lives. That initial conversation is quite challenging, isn't it? Can we talk about this? I mean, are there ways of can you give any tips and maybe ways of how can we even kickstart the conversation in the first place?
I think a good place to start is to think about what you do appreciate about each other. And if there is some kind of physical contact still going on. So maybe you love back rubs and you've only been having what culture would term sex once every 3 months or so, but your husband or your partner gives you back rubs and you absolutely love it. Intimate touches like that. And it's to focus in on them and express your appreciation, how much you enjoy it, or to maybe look back on a time when you were more physical with each other. And without saying, oh, it was great then, you don't do that anymore. Expressing appreciation and how much you enjoyed it and that you would like to have that again, but opening the dialogue the other way, saying, is there any little thing that I used to do that you really wish that I would do again? And they might say, well, do you remember you sometimes used to wash my hair for me in the bath? It's like, oh God, we haven't done that for years. Why don't we try that again? And opening up that communication and a sense of appreciation for each other before you then go into the topic of sex. And with any kind of conversation like this that might be difficult, initially making clear that you're coming from a place of wanting to make things better together with that person, not from a place of criticism.
Supposing it's coming from a place where one partner has been unfaithful. You decided to come back together again. Maybe one person felt, well, I do want that erotic sex, that we've been married for 2 years. I couldn't get it with you. I've been unfaithful. You decided to give your marriage another go. But that person who was the one who had been cheated on, that could really be quite difficult, couldn't it? To then rekindle that old love when you have those old images perhaps going through your mind of that person being unfaithful, what have you. Is it still even possible from that place, from that scenario, to reconnect and get your sex life back to how it was, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I would recommend any couple who are dealing with this, even if they think they're dealing with it really well, to have a couple of sessions with a couples counsellor. I'm not specialised in couples, but yeah, even if you think it's all cool, you've talked it all through, you've dealt with it, I would still very strongly recommend, even if it's just 1 or 2 sessions, somewhere like Relate, getting some professional help with that, seeing it as an investment in the relationship going forward. And then from that point, in fact, sometimes an affair, whilst I would never encourage it, sometimes an affair can be the ultimate reboot. Say if it's your partner who's cheated on you, say if you haven't looked at your partner as a sexual being for years, and suddenly you're aware somebody else obviously viewed them as a massively sexual being, you're like, oh, and it can awaken and reinvigorate that appreciation. As I say, I am not recommending it as a strategy at all, but it's the same as any challenge, be it that a marriage just feels like the sex has gone, or an affair. A reboot is a chance if both sides genuinely want to try again, with a bit of professional couples counselling to make sure there's not stuff lurking in the background that's going to come out. It's a chance for fresh and open communication of what do we each want and what do we want together going forward. So I definitely don't think it's necessarily the end of the road, and it can be an amazing kickstart, but as I say, I'm not recommending it. So it's about everything. It's about how one deals with these kinds of challenges. So another,
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, another example could be if one of a couple has had an accident that has resulted in some kind of disability. You know, pretty much any challenge you can think of, as you know, as a coach, ultimately it all comes down to communication and intent. If you both have a genuine intent to make it work, and if you're able to communicate, then you can make it happen.
Okay, so it's in the media every day on social media, magazines, all the rest of it. They have these images out there, what erotic sex should be like, what sex with your partner should be like. And the people that they have in these images, our bodies as women don't necessarily look like that, or even for the men doesn't necessarily look like that. How much does that play around in people's minds? Like, well, I don't quite look like the women in those magazines or what have you. You know, you've had a baby. Sometimes you've had a baby. Your body has changed shape, and this can really impact your insecurity. So you may well want that good old sex life again, but the insecurity, that voice in your head that's just telling you that you don't look quite good enough. Is there a way that we can still bounce back from that, to let that go and just have a really great erotic sexual sex life?
I think it's beneficial to recognize that sexual energy is something that doesn't come from how you look or whether you're in a relationship, all that kind of stuff. It's something that wells up from deep inside you and is a force in its own right and isn't dependent on how we look. This kind of ties into rewilding, because I would say part of rewilding our sex lives is rejecting all those messages that you can't or you shouldn't have it unless you look like this, unless you look like this. I was thinking earlier, well, what's the opposite of wild? And it's captivity. And we've all been bred in captivity to believe that we're only worthy of sex, or we can only have pleasure if we look a certain way, if our bodies function a certain way, if we're below a certain age. And we need to reject all of that and go wild again. But it is very difficult, particularly when we've had a lifetime of these kinds of images. I do think that for younger people now, there is a lot more diversity thanks to things like social media and Instagram. I know we get shown more of what we've seen, so we are in a bubble, but at least it's accessible there. So if the idea of people with disabilities having sex lives has come into your head and you've never thought of it before, and you think, I've never thought of that, you could go to Instagram, do a hashtag search and find loads of fantastic information, great content, everything in terms of diversifying what our view is of who is sexual, who's allowed to experience sexual pleasure, and who fits the visual type of being someone who can have sexual pleasure. We have the potential now to absolutely blow apart the kind of images that you and I'm in my mid-40s. I believe you are
53.
50. Yep. Yeah. So we grew up with magazines, airbrushed magazines, presenting us a certain type of image. But as I say, for younger generations now, and for all of us with social media, there is the opportunity to blow that apart now and be much, much more aware.
I love that. And this is, I mean, you know, I have obviously a love-hate situation with social media.
Yeah.
There was a time we were just fed the same old stuff. And so you picked up something else, which I'll go on before I move on, where of course they're the algorithms and we are being fed the same information. Just be aware of that you are going to have to consciously put yourself out. Start Googling different stuff to be exposed to new imagery and new mindset to be coming into you. But you're right, through social media now, these different groups, different hashtags, you can really start seeing the world from what it is. We don't have to be as trapped as we was in our minds, like I said, for those of us in our 40s, 50s, probably late 30s, even before, because then you'll realize that actually it is a bigger, more beautiful, more rich world out there, and you don't have to be those images that they keep projecting to us. And so you've touched on something really important there, that sexual energy is very different to the sex that's projected in our minds. Let's talk a bit more about the sexual energy. How would you describe that, Ruth?
Well, people in this field will use the term eros. So if a way I describe it is sex is the physical act. So you could say animals have a sex life, but eroticism, what we're talking about, erotic energy, erotic spirit, is what we as humans surround that act with in terms of meaning, emotion, spirit, all that extra stuff aside from it being just a physical act. But I think because the physical act gets so much attention in the media and is made such a big deal of, as I said back at the start, very typically PIV, penis in vagina, that is what sex is. But if we expand that to eroticism, or keep the word sex but expand our understanding of it to a much wider sphere, and as I said earlier, all our senses are involved. Spirituality can come into it, very much so. Sometimes this is something I'm only just starting to explore in my mind, but the idea that the combination of those things almost creates a sense in its own right. Something that I experienced as a dancer, so I was a striptease artist for 12 years, starting in 2002. So as I was going through those 12 years, lap dancing came to the UK and became more and more and more popular. So in my last few years, I was doing a lot of lap dancing. And you would see the change in someone's eyes. It's so difficult to describe it if someone's not experienced it, but it was a perceptible change in that person's energy field when their erotic spirit was ignited. And this would happen even if I, as a straight woman, was dancing for a straight woman. It was something more than I want to fuck you. You know, it was not that. It was something much, much more than that. And that's that sort of rising of spirit and that energy that can come when we allow ourselves to feel that, I think can enrich all of our lives. And I've lost my train of I've forgotten your
don't worry, we were talking about what happened. You got into the whole spirit and the whole energy of stuff.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I want to say on that was a massive learning point for me, and that's really at the core of all my beliefs about this, is that erotic energy, that change in that person's energy field that I would sense, was the same whatever somebody's age or level of physical ability. So it would be the same in a frail 80-year-old. It would be the same in a straight woman who I was dancing for. It would be the same for someone quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And it would be the same for an athletic 20-something. It's something timeless, and it's something that seems to almost transcend all the other aspects of what makes up our personality. It was something that could be quite surprising. So someone who seemed very sort of quiet and quite meek in their personality, when that erotic spirit happened, it might actually be quite fiery and quite all-consuming. And it's like, wow, I didn't expect this from this person. And yeah, it's something which I believe is unique to us throughout our lives, doesn't diminish or weaken, stays strong. And then depending on what you think happens after our physical death, I would think it's something that remains a part of our spirit and a part of our soul going forward. In some ways, it's the absolute deepest core of who we are, I believe.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And And the reason I love it is because, and this is how I was relating to that. So I teach public speaking. And what will happen is, say women will come along. I teach primarily women, although open to men as well. And they will come along and they're still in that, what I call the barren state, really. So we're confined to the outside world and the outside messages, and that's really just containing you. And then there hits a point where they let it go. And they reach this new level, this new domain, and it's almost like a flow. And for me, watching it, it's like I see doves fly, doves leave them. And I believe this is what rewilding is. Listening to you as you were speaking, is that, first of all, that having to let that old world, the old belief systems, and it's very limiting, those systems, aren't there, and those beliefs. And it's finding it's working through that, getting through that, and almost getting to the other side. And when you get to the other side, that's what you're right. It then supersedes age, sexuality, disability, religion, blah, blah, blah. And I suppose your job is helping to guide them there. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Just going back to rewilding. And I loved when we were in communications before this recording and you used that term. And then I thought, how would that apply to sex and eroticism? And it just works so brilliantly. Because with rewilding in terms of nature, what it's about is letting nature do its thing. So if you have 100 fields and you're going to rewild them, you don't plant trees in straight rows at a certain interval that science has said is the optimal interval for those trees to be planted from each other in straight rows. Ideally, you just let it go, because the chaos that happens within nature and the balance that then is found is the magic. It's why it works. And there's a school of thought that we can't engineer that as humans. We need to just let things go wild again. And I think if you apply that to your erotic life, what that's about is within an erotic encounter or within your erotic life on a bigger scale, moment to moment, thinking, what feels good now? What feels right now? Not what should I be doing, or what worked last week, or what worked for my partner last week. I'll do that again, let alone last month, last year, let alone 20 years ago when we were first married. It's what feels good now? What would feel good now? What would feel good now? And going step by step with those feelings and just seeing what happens, rather than having this idea of, if I do A, B, C, then I'm going to have an orgasm at X, and then we should both be happy. No, it's a space for curiosity and exploration, and letting your energy and that partner's energy, if you're with a partner, work together to do something that can't necessarily be predicted at the start.
This is so beautiful. So this is really moving it from the head to the heart to the soul, and just connecting with the essence within that person. It's almost like two essence connecting. And
yes, absolutely.
And letting that happen. Gosh, Ruth, we could talk about this for ages. It's so amazing. I think you're fabulous. I really do. And I really hope and believe it's going to take courage, I know, for many people, which I'm sure is like you help them with that courage. But I really do believe that when you see it from this perspective, when you see it from a spiritual perspective, when you take it away from these rules that have been plunged in our brains into society and taken away our self-expression and our awesomeness, when we're able to let that go, this shows that, like you said, you know, it's separate to how long you've been together and children and only having sex 4 times a week, month. It's taking it to somewhere else. It's taking it to another level where you almost connect with that God inside of you. Who knows? Ruth, give me 3 takeaways for my audience, my darling, please.
Okay. The first one would be to work on yourself first. So that could mean, well, I recommend to everyone to listen to podcasts about sex. This is the best thing, because when you hear other people, other voices talking about sex, using sexual terms, I only got into podcasts about a year ago. And even for me at first, it was It was quite shocking. I was listening to them while I was cooking lunch, and I was like, I can't say that out loud. But it normalizes. You learn lots of fantastic stuff. I learn from every podcast I listen to about sex.
I must interject there, second and third. I remember, and I'm very liberated, and believe in self-expressive and all the rest of it. And I had to do an interview with someone who's made this book and wrote this book, and it was at the Vagina Museum in Covent Garden. And I lost my way, and I actually had to ask someone, where's the Vagina Museum? And I was struggling for this to come out of my mouth. I was like, come on, Ingrid, like, what's the matter with you? Just say it. Do you know what I mean? So like you said, I can imagine when you first start listening to it, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Please do carry on.
So work on getting in touch with yourself, with educating yourself, because sexual science now, compared to when we were at school, whatever sex education we had, but so much has happened. I can provide you some links and recommendations to include in your show notes if you like. Right. Educate yourself on the latest sexual science and spend time getting in touch with yourself in terms of what you might want erotically. And there's lots of stuff out there to help you with that. So that's one takeaway. A second takeaway would be to expand your view of sex or of eroticism beyond just penis and vagina or whatever is applicable within your dynamic for that, and expand it out as much as possible into even a little stroke across your partner's shoulders as you walk past them in the kitchen. That is part of sex. It's part of eroticism. Don't think, oh, my sex life is only happening in that 20 minutes in bed at that time. No, expand it. Look for opportunities. If you feel that erotic energy rising within you, look for a way to express it. That doesn't necessarily then mean we have to go to bed. So something I hear quite a lot from clients is, oh, I'll feel a bit sexy, but I didn't do anything about it because there wasn't time to go to bed, or because the kids were playing up, or this or that. No, reach out. Literally, if you're with a partner, reach out, even if it's just a little touch. And then the third thing would be communication. I know, as you said earlier, it could be so different. How on earth do you approach your partner and say, look, we need to work on our sex life? But I've given you a few tips in this. But to approach it from a place of, I want this with you, let's work on it together. But also the last tip within that, take it slowly. Very often clients, it's a long journey to get to working with me or to voicing concerns to a partner, but they might not be there yet. Give them time to come round to the idea. It might be that they need to see you working on yourself to be inspired themselves to do the same. So it is a long game here. You're not gonna
sorry to interrupt. So can they come to you first without their partner?
Oh, absolutely.
So
yes, absolutely.
First before that next stage. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Also, being single is a great time for sex coaching or to work on yourself, because you're not thinking about, oh, but how is my partner going to react, or how might they judge me? You're totally free to explore within yourself. As I said, it begins with you. Yes. So single is a fantastic time as well.
And I love that because I was having a conversation with someone recently, actually. We were talking about this whole thing, and I was like, you've got to be in love with yourself first. You've got to.
Absolutely.
I have a relationship with myself every night. I have like my candles, my music. It's this sensual environment that I live in. So that's truly awesome. Well, Ruth, you are amazing beyond words. And thank you so much for putting a whole new spin and light and energy on this topic for us to rewild ourselves, rewild our sex lives, live a far more fruitful and fulfilling, or should I say wildly fulfilling life. How do we get in touch with you?
My website is ruthramsay.com. It's Ramsay with an AY. That's the one thing most people get wrong. So ruthramsay.com, and from there you can find my social links. I love Instagram, Ruth Ramsay _. Just a little point, if you're following sex educators on Instagram and you like their content, sign up to their newsletters, because our accounts are constantly at risk of getting shut down. If you're on our newsletter, we can always stay in touch with you if that happens. So please do that with sex educators that you follow. And yeah, ruthramsay.com, everything can come from there. So
marvelous. Ruth, thank you so very much indeed. You've been an absolute superstar. Thank you so much.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Lovely to be here.